for serious readers.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, in your most recent book, Writings on the Wall, Searching for a New Equality Beyond Black and White, you write, "It's as if we've invented the most precise and beautiful watch ever created, then strapped it to the tail of a wild jackal." What are you talking about there?
Well, I'm talking about the fact that most Americans don't appreciate the fact that their vote means a lot and their opinion means a lot. So they have the ability to have their voices heard and acted upon in our great democracy, but they don't take advantage of it. So we have this really incredible democracy that gives the average person power, and the average person does not vote. I think it's a shame that of all the developed democracies in the world, the United States is last in voter participation. That really bothers me, because if we don't keep our eyes on the prize, and if we don't understand how we have to constantly be monitoring what's going on and taking the steps to rectify any problems, these problems are going to multiply, and we end up like we are now, very divided and at each other's throats. That should not be the case, but unless the people want to participate in this democracy, that's what's going to happen.
You're calling for new arguments or new ways to look at old arguments. How so?
Well, I'm calling for new arguments. The Founding Fathers really understood that they had their own biases and their own idiosyncrasies, and that maybe they didn't get it all right. So they gave us a document, the Constitution, that allows it to be amended and tweaked so that it can deal with problems as they arise. That was, I think, the genius of what the Founding Fathers did. And at this point in the life of our democracy, the average person is not engaged and not involved. And if that happens, we end up with a mess like we have right now.
So in your view, is the cream not rising to the top when it comes to politics?
I think,
and politicians?
I think people are asleep at the wheel with regard to using their vote. They need to use their vote to punish the politicians who ignore their needs. So many politicians are more interested in getting reelected than they are in dealing with the needs of their constituents. They get elected, they start asking for money from wealthy people to get reelected, and they forget about the people that they're supposed to be representing. That's a real problem, and unless the people who are suffering from that lack of attention, unless they do something about it by using their vote, this is going to continue.
One of the issues that you address in Writings on the Wall is the education system. What would you like to see changed?
Well, I'd like to see the money that is spent on education actually go to employing competent teachers and making a good education accessible to all Americans. That has changed drastically. Our public education system used to work for everybody, and now it doesn't. Now we have exclusive schools that are able to produce elite students, and then we have other schools like in the inner cities where it's just a joke. The kids don't get educated and they suffer for it. We have to change that. We have to get everybody involved. We also have to get parents involved, have them participate in the decisions that are made in our school boards and everything. And that, again, requires them being involved and caring and using their vote for city councils and people who are going to be elected to the school board. All of these things are very crucial to getting the result that you want, which is an excellent education for all of our students.
You write that there is much inequality in America, but the most destructive inequality is economic.
Absolutely. I think people who do not have the opportunity to support their families end up dealing with desperate measures to support their families, to support themselves. We have so many people who can't afford to raise their children the way that their children need to be raised, and they give up. We have a whole lot of abandonment of young people because the system does not accommodate their needs, and we have to change that.
One of the new arguments, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, that you put in your book is an argument over the R word. We've all heard about the N word, but you talk about race as the R word. Why?
Well, race is really a very artificial construct. From what we can understand, from what anthropologists and sociologists tell us, people look differently because they evolved in different physical circumstances. People who evolved under the bright sun at the equator got darker skin than people who evolved away from the equator. But we're all Homo sapiens. We're all the same species. But just the non-essential physical differences that we have seem to put people in a situation where they think that they are different from other people. We're all the same. And in America, we see what that means because all of us are able to contribute to our democracy with our intelligence and our hard work to equal degrees. So we have to forget about the whole idea of race and understand that it's all about who you live with, you know, the people in your community. That's so much more important than what you look like in terms of your physiology.
Your book is semi-autobiographical as well, and you write that you've been writing for 40, 50 years.
Yes, I have.
What's changed? What's gotten better?
I think the whole idea that people are starting to see, even people who don't look like them, they're starting to understand that these are your fellow Americans. So in that sense, we are part of the same group. Our ancestors came from various different places, but we're all here now, and this is our country, and we got to do everything we can to make it the greatest place in the world.
From your book, I was called an N in high school. I was called an N when I played at UCLA. And I was called an N last week by someone who didn't like an article I wrote.
I put that sentence in there to let people know that racism is still an issue. It's still a problem. The election of President Obama did not eliminate the racism and the systemic racism that we have to deal with here in America. A lot of our institutions are racially fragmented, and there is bias at the heart of a lot of different institutions in America. And we have to understand that and try to eliminate those problems when we can.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, are you a role model?
Whether I like it or not, I am a role model. The fact that I was able to achieve what I was able to achieve as an athlete and hopefully as an author, it makes me a role model. I'm a parent, so I have to be a role model. All parents are role models. So I don't think that any of us escapes that burden. For some it's a burden, for others it's a joy, but we all end up in that position.
Are you a national role model?
Well, I guess so. I'll have to accept that.
Is that a good thing?
It can be a good thing. I have to make it a good thing. It's up to me to decide what I can do with it and how to use it. So I've been trying to use it in a positive way.
And you write that I have a complicated relationship with the media. I've used my celebrity to take political positions.
I think that I've tried to use my celebrity in a way that enables me to say things that need to be said. And I'm glad to see there are other athletes that are getting in line with that. When Tamir Rice was killed so unnecessarily in Cleveland, LeBron James came out and said something about it. I think that was very important to me. You know, the fact that LeBron, despite his incredible celebrity and achievement as an athlete, he was concerned about the killing of a young person in his community that should not have been killed. That was awesome. I was happy to see it. I'm glad that whole tradition of activism has not died in our community. There were a couple of members of the Cleveland Browns also who came out and said something, and some of the guys on the police force seemed to have an issue with that. These guys were parents, and they could see easily how their kid could have been Tamir Rice quite under the same circumstances. So their concerns were valid, and they voiced their concerns, and I'm happy they did that.
Is it controversial? Is it harmful to a professional athlete to take a political stance?
It can be harmful to a professional athlete, but I think you have to take that risk if the issue is that important and that meaningful to you. It's worth taking the risk.
When did you start writing?
Geez, I started writing when I was in grade school, really. I'm still in touch with the nun that taught me in 7th and 8th grade, and she wrote me and said that she remembered they entered me into an essay contest while I was in the 8th grade because I was the best writer in my class. So, it's something I've enjoyed my whole life.
But books and looking in research, when did you start into that?
Research. I enjoyed research. I enjoyed being a historian. Just finding out what happened and understanding how that affects what's going to happen. If we don't learn from the mistakes that we've made, we are condemned to repeating them. So knowing what happened is a crucial issue for anybody who wants to understand what's going to happen.
You talk in Writings on the Wall about your conversion to Islam and what it's meant to you and what it's meant to other people.
Well, I think my conversion to Islam really was something that was personal to me. It was a religious event in my life. People have tried to make it political, but really it was a spiritual thing for me. And I think Islam has given me a moral anchor that has enabled me to differentiate between right and wrong and understand life in those terms. So, my conversion to Islam was something that was very personal. It ended up becoming political, but I didn't want it to be like that. I probably would have done it different if I had had a chance to go back. I'd do it a little bit differently because I didn't necessarily have to be so public with it. But it was important to me, and it was a way for me to assert my own identity as a Black American and not have to be portrayed as somebody who was fitting a stereotype that was not actually me. So it enabled me to define myself, and as such, it was very important to me.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Manhattan, New York City. I was born and raised in Harlem. And, had a great time growing up in Manhattan. I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
What'd your parents do?
My dad was a police officer. My mom was a seamstress. She did alterations and made dresses and stuff like that.
And you mentioned a Catholic nun as a teacher. You went to Catholic schools?
I went to Catholic school up through high school, and then I went to UCLA.
In your book, you talk about rules, following the rules of the nuns, following the rules of the coaches, following the rules of Dad.
Well, yeah, I've had a lot of coaching. I've had to understand discipline from a lot of other people's vantage points. So I'm happy at this point in my life that I'm following my own path.
What are you doing these days?
These days, I'm writing. I'm spending time with my granddaughter. I'm a new grandparent. I have a beautiful granddaughter, and just trying to take in what's happening in the world. And
what about your charity?
I have a foundation. My foundation tries to get kids from the inner city to understand what STEM education is all about: science, technology, engineering, and math. So we send them to camp for 5 days and 4 nights, and give them an opportunity to be exposed to STEM education, and that enables them to get an idea of where all the good jobs are going to be in the 21st century. So I think it's a good thing to get kids to understand what the possibilities are. So many kids, especially in the inner cities, they all want to be Denzel Washington or Beyonce or LeBron James. They don't understand that there are so many great jobs out there that require them to be well-grounded in science, technology, engineering, or math. So by giving them an insight as to where the jobs are at the right time in their lives, I think that makes it possible for them to take a good path toward achieving their goals.
Does writing come easy to you?
Writing, I think writing does come easy to me. It's something I enjoy it. I'm able to organize my thoughts in a coherent way and get them out there. So yeah, I think writing is something that it's a natural application for me. I seem to enjoy it.
Is it easier than being out in the public?
At times it's easier than being in the public because you have time to think things through and make sure that everything is what it needs to be, so that your message is coherent. You know, if you can't have your thoughts organized and present them in an intelligent and organized way, people aren't going to get what you're all about.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you recently penned an op-ed in support of Hillary Clinton. Why?
Well, I'm supporting Mrs. Clinton because I think that she has the thoughts and the concerns about the lower classes and middle classes that have been ignored by so many politicians. And I think that, you know, her focus on trying to make the government and make the political system work for the average person, I think that's very worthwhile, and I support her in that.
If somebody said to you, I'm a Donald Trump supporter, do you come to an immediate, do you have an immediate picture in your head of who they are?
No, I don't. I have an idea of who they are. So many people now are being motivated by fear. So, you know, the whole idea of what Mr. Trump says about immigrants and everything, trying to make us afraid of Mexican immigrants or Muslims, I think it's reprehensible and certainly not an accurate portrait of immigrants or Muslims or any of the other issues that he claims to be so knowledgeable about. I think he's really showing everybody how ignorant he is. And it's unfortunate, but that's what's happening.
In Writings on the Wall, you talk about reaction and reacting from fear. What's your prescription?
I think the only way that we can get over fear is through knowledge, becoming familiar with the issues that we seem to be afraid of. Once you get an idea of what is actually happening, you can figure out a solution that does not involve building walls across the Mexican border. We can fix a lot of these issues if we have an honest and rational approach to it. I don't think we're going to solve anything by fear-mongering and demonizing people. That doesn't work.
Is it time, in your view, we talked to Bill Ayers yesterday, and is it time, in your view, to try a brand new system?
Well, I mentioned earlier, the Founding Fathers gave us the means to tweak the Constitution and to make the adjustments that need to be made as we move forward, because there are new issues and new problems that the Founding Fathers did not foresee. So they gave us the means to deal with it, and we have to just use the tools that we have. Too many people are ignorant of the fact that we have these tools, and that's a shame. And once we get that idea across to people, I think a lot of people will calm down and do what they have to do to affect meaningful change.
One more issue you brought up in Writings on the Wall, political correctness. What does that term mean to you?
Geez, political correctness really just had to do with trying to be polite to people. I don't see it as a big problem. Just trying to be respectful to other people and not offend them by the way you depict them and talk about them. That's just trying to be gracious. That's all it's about. I don't think it's a big political issue, but some people want to make a big deal of it. I don't think it's a real problem.
If somebody says I'm not politically correct, what does that mean to you?
I think to me it means that maybe they have some offensive things that they want to say about people, and they're kind of annoyed that they have to watch what they say. But being polite is it's a social grace that a lot of us could use some instruction in.
Where did this book come from?
This book came from just how I feel about what's going on in my country, and it's my attempt at trying to talk about some solutions that might work. That's all it is.
And it's your what, fifth, sixth book?
My 11th, I think.
11th.
Yeah.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Writings on the Wall is the name of the book, searching for a new equality beyond black and white. It comes out August of 2016. You're watching Book TV on C-SPAN 2.
Here's a look at some authors recently featured on Book TV.